We are classmates, and it's a double privilege. First, being here, I would like to express my gratitude to IDSA, particularly Director General and the friends who invited me to come here, and to my friend Devi, who is chairing the session. Professor Ali Jalali has already given you an excellent background about what is transnational crime. So I am not going to spend my time talking about the same things again, even though my field is terrorism research and my specialization is terrorist financing, and in many cases one of the major sources of income for the terrorist groups is criminal activities. He has already mentioned that. What I am going to do is look at another aspect of counterterrorism and fighting crime, which has become a major discourse in recent years, especially after 9/11. As you know, let me just go to some key questions which I am going to pose today and try to have discussions on that. 9/11 is a singular event. There is no doubt about it. It has changed the world in a number of ways. At the same time also, after 9/11, the response by the governments to counter the threat posed by the groups like Al-Qaeda and others, or now they call it the global jihadist movement, has changed our life in a number of ways. It has also impacted on our security by the terrorists and our rights and liberties by the states when they are trying to counter the threat. So there is a huge debate, or you can say disconnect, between state policies to counter the threat of terrorism and the proponents of human rights and, in a broader sense, human security. In many countries, terrorism is being seen as an existential threat, and there are questions. This comes from the perception that terrorism has a huge impact on public life, governance, development, and overall security, not only of a particular country, but also of the international community as a whole. This also brings to questions the state's ability to provide other kinds of public good. Security is a public good, but there are also other kinds of public goods, such as human security we have been talking about, and this whole conference is all about non-traditional security issues. So if you concentrate your policies, resources on a particular aspect of security, that is hard security against terrorist groups, it undermines or deviates resources from providing other type of public goods like human security. So there is a tension between these two, and I am going to demonstrate that in my presentation today. This comes from also the argument that terrorism is definitely important. It is also significant threat to human survival, but it is not the largest killer, because if you compare the number of people killed or injured by terrorist incidents with crime, people killed by criminal activities, domestic violence in India, for example, or even by small arms, you will see there is a huge disconnect. So, in that context, when governments take policies, do they need to prioritize one over the other, or they have to actually make a balance between that? So that is the crux of my presentation: how to balance the needs of hard security, which we definitely need. And you have seen yesterday's incident. A new type of threat has come to your city, magnetic bombs, which was never used in India, and it will have differently very significant implications for counter security measures in the city. So you can see the governments have to adopt new measures to try to see how they can prevent this type of attacks from taking place, because on a crowded Delhi road, it is very easy to stick a bomb into a car and run away. So it's quite a challenge, and in that case, we have to see whether we can make a balance between this, the requirements for fighting terrorism and providing other public goods. India is a complex country, and also the terrorist threat is also, or insurgency is quite complex. It ranks among world's most affected countries. The threat is complex and multifaceted, and number of regions, but most of the conflicts in India which has led to political violence are old and predate 9/11, and it has local roots. It's not necessarily linked to the global jihadist movement. There might be some occasions where people have demonstrated intention to carry out attacks on behalf of the jihadist ideology movement, but it is not as widespread as in many countries we have in the West or in other parts of the world. And nature of the conflicts are different, though there might be some convergence. And terrorism is the most prominent armed violence issue in India in terms of policies, but not the cause of most casualties. As I have to say, it is not. And I am going to give you some statistics. In note on statistics, only one agency comprehensively compiles terrorist incidents, or maybe two, but I am not sure whether they are very comprehensive enough or exactly accurate. So I am not going to go into the merits of that numbers, but just to show you the death and casualties of terrorist violence. And then you can see the deaths, civilian, security forces and terrorists over the years. Most of the casualties, of course, is civilians and security forces. Government response dominate official priorities. Government has mix of hard and soft measures, including negotiated settlements in some parts of the country, and socio-economic developments. Most of the socio-economic development projects have failed or failed to deliver desired results. That may be a systemic issue, governance issue, or issue of corruptions and others, but there are definitely some measures which government has taken. And it has yielded mixed results. In some parts of the country, insurgencies or terrorist movements have been subdued. Some have joined the mainstream politics, and in some cases it continues to grow and metamorphose into other types of violence. If you compare just one aspect of criminality, and the statistics of crime I have taken from NCRB database, the latest report came out recently, 2010. Criminal murder. This combines murder, culpable homicide, and I think these two aspects. Just compare it with terrorist acts, death from terrorism. You see the huge disconnect. Large number of in larger number of people are being killed in India from crime or criminal activities than from terrorism. You can see the different types of crime: murder, attempted murder, dowry deaths, suicides, accidental shooting, which is actually linked to small arms, suicides and accidental shooting. Sorry, this has just become. I don't know how it became like that. Anyway, you can see in most of the cases, the numbers are definitely higher than the death caused by terrorist activities. Continues to increase. There may be, because if you look at the reports of the NCRB over the years, you see the number of reported crimes is increasing. But this may be due to willingness to report, because in many cases crimes were not being reported. Increase in actual incidents also, and there are also regional variations. Some states are more crime prone than others. Then look at the root causes, and this is the most important part of it, which I am going to emphasize. As spelled out by the NCRB report, most of the cases, the underlying causes for crime are poverty, unemployment, rapid urbanization, uncontrolled urban migration, malgovernance or lack of governance, corruption, and then security apparatus lacks resources, provision of perception of impunity, and political interference. And then we have organized criminal groups, which Professor Ali has mentioned. In fact, women are most vulnerable, disproportionately victimized by criminal activities. And of course, unfortunately, if you have seen incidents in Delhi also, the city has become one of the, you can say, unfortunately, very obviously called the rape capital of the world. Children and youth. But there is also an implicit acceptance of criminal activities as an old enterprise, because it is going on, and we are getting used to it, and we think it is a law enforcement problem. Then when we allocate resources, we have seen also government spending emphasizes security sector spending, including conventional, military and nuclear, more than threats to human security issues. And this has increased after November 2008 Mumbai attacks. Coming to policy implications, I have tried to show you that there are more number of people are getting affected by crime in one way or other, even death and injury and other type of psychological and other impacts. Then why do we spend so much money on countering terrorism and not so much money on countering crime? And police force traditionally were created to fight crime. Now they are fighting terrorism also. So when we allocate resources, especially after 9/11, a single terrorist incident creates more awareness or impact than a single criminal activity. So this is because the impact of terrorism and insurgency is much deeper than merely number of resultant casualties. It's a direct threat to the stability of the state and the legitimacy of the government. It undermines the root of the government and even economic and social progress. So we just can't calculate the number and say that there should be equality in allocation of resources, or it should be equivalent, or it should be proportionate to the number of casualties. Crime and terrorism also share similar or same root causes, which might not be mutually exclusive. About root causes, actually I was reminded of an article written by Amartya Sen, Violence, Identity and Poverty. He has approached this particular issue from two, he has examined two causes. Was a civilizational causes approach, which is actually the discourse which came out most prominently in Samuel Huntington's famous book Clash of Civilizations, which actually some say was validated by 9/11 attacks. Then the discourse became a class of civilizations among the Islamist world and the non-Islamist world. And some also took this further to say that it is not exactly a class of civilizations, but class within civilization, that is within the Muslim world, which is creating this problem. Amartya Sen has also come out with another called political economy approach, which is actually looks at poverty, unemployment as among others as the root causes of violence. However, 9/11 attacks actually undermine the argument of poverty and unemployment as causes of political violence, so terrorism, because as you know, the 19 hijackers, they were from very well-to-do families, including the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, leader of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. They were very rich men. So it was not possible, when many of the terrorists who were arrested in Malaysia and Singapore, they were from very well-to-do families, rich and not necessarily poor. But that actually undermined and there was a lot of research and studies done in many countries, and they came to conclusion that poverty is an unemployment and the current form of organized political violence, jihadist threat, are not related. But that is not correct. In many countries, poverty and unemployment are still the root causes of political violence as well, even and as it is for the criminal activities. So Amartya Sen suggests that it is a combination of both, not alone, and they actually intersect. They are not mutually exclusive. So attempts to subdue one form of violence, like terrorism, should not manifest in another form of violence, that is criminal activities. This is where actually our policy focus has gone a quite bit astray, because in many countries the focus is mainly on countering the terrorist threat, and that is why in allocation of resources we are disproportionately biased in favor of counter-terrorism efforts, and that has in many cases, especially resource scarce countries, it has undermined the state's ability to provide other human security, other public goods like human security or human rights. And there is also this tension between human rights issues and counter-terrorism policies. So that also needs to be balanced. So we need to have a proportionality on state security vis-a-vis the security of the individual. That is the most important aspect. One thing is I must emphasize is when this before 9/11, when this human security discourse was one of the predominant discourses in security debate, state was considered as the worst provider of human security. So the scholars talked about getting the state out and let the civil society take over the provision of public human security. But that particular argument was undermined by 9/11 attacks, because the type of response that was required to deal with the threat posed by the perpetrators of terrorist attacks on 9/11 could not be done by any other agency but the state. Because you need armed forces, you need police, you need, and there is no agency which can actually respond to that type of threat. So the human security discourse was relegated to the background. Now the question has come again, after spending $300 billion and invading countries, limiting the individual freedoms, limiting rights of intruding into individual identities, your secrecies, bank secret, privacy and security, whether we have been able to reduce the threat of terrorism. If you look at the incidents, number of incidents after 9/11, you will see that number of attacks attributed to which the US government database considers as Islamist groups has increased from 4,000 some odd figures to around 37,000. So it is actually increased exponentially, and it is now we have also got this new concept of homegrown jihadists, individual leaderless persons who are getting indoctrinated from the internet, getting instructions from the internet, trying to carry out attacks on their own. So the threat has not reduced. We have spent a huge amount of money. We have intruded into human security and human liberties and rights of the individuals, but we have not been able to provide complete security, and that has been demonstrated again and again in India with repeated number of attacks. So if we accept that crime and terrorism share common roots, then we have to make a balance between how we deal with this threat in terms of allocation of resources and our policy priorities. Thank you very much.